Hey there, it's Blair here at Time Trades. This is a tutorial video on the Time Trade script and the Time Trades intraday script. So I want to walk through all the features of these scripts. This is not going to be an analysis video. This is more like a how-to video that describes how to use the script, starting with how do you get access to these. So the first step in getting access to these invite-only scripts is to head on over to time-trades.com. That is the website that I run, and you can create an account there. And when you do that, you will be prompted to enter your TradingView username. When you enter a TradingView username, I will be notified, and then I can provision the scripts. I have to do that manually, and I'll usually do that within 12 to 24 hours of being notified. So be patient while I do that manual process. Depends on what else is going on, because unfortunately there are no APIs. I cannot automate that step in provisioning the scripts. So once you get access to the scripts, you will receive a notification over here in TradingView on, there used to be a bell icon over here, but you will probably get notified in some manner. It's not an alert of these scripts being provisioned to your account. Okay, I typically do not email you or let you know. I let the TradingView notification system handle that. And if you ever have any questions about script provisioning, you can always reach out to me on Twitter or on email. My email is on the webpage. My Twitter is pretty easy to find at TimeTrades1. Okay, so once you've got access to the script, you can add it to your chart by clicking on indicators up here and then searching in the invite only section for time trades. Okay, and you'll see it here, and I am YYC Trade on TradingView. Okay, so that is me, and then you can add it to your chart. And once you've added it to your chart, it'll appear up here, and you can get access to the settings by clicking this hexagon. It used to be a gear, but they've gone and changed it to an hexagon. So these are all of the settings that are built into the time trade script. There's a number of timing options that are visible and a number of price level options that are visible. So let's start with the timing options. Venus intervals are probably the single most important part of time trades, and I always lead with these. These are really quite important. And I'm just going to turn that on. And then you can see here on this weekly chart on the NQ, you can see it draws a number of boxes. It might make a little bit more sense when you flip over to a daily chart. And now you can see boxes labeled 1 through 6, and these intervals have meaning. And I'm just going to pause the recording here as we flip over to a little slide that I use to explain the meaning of those numbers. Okay, so we're looking at the explanation of what are these interval numbers, what do they mean? So you should see a chart here that shows numbers 1 through 6, and it really has to do with the relationship between Earth and an inner planet like Mercury or Venus. In this case, we're using Venus, okay? So the cycle counting, the interval counts start with what's called an inferior conjunction. This is where Venus is right between Earth and the Sun. That starts interval number 1. And then interval 1 continues until a point called the maximum western elongation. This is where the separation between Venus and the Sun is at its peak. All right, that starts interval 2. Interval 2 continues until Venus hits the opposite of its maximum elongation, so 180 degrees opposite from that. And then interval 3 starts. Interval 3 is another Venus-Sun conjunction. That happens to be what's called the superior conjunction. That's on the far side of the Sun, when Venus is on the far side of the Sun relative to Earth. That continues, that kicks off interval 4. Interval 4 continues until it reaches 180 degrees opposite of maximum western elongation. Okay. And then that point kicks off interval number 5. That continues until we hit maximum eastern elongation. This is, again, the point where the separation between Venus and the Sun reaches its maximum relative to Earth. And then we complete a cycle with interval 6 as Venus approaches another conjunction with the Sun, another inferior conjunction with the Sun. So the whole process takes a little bit over 2 years. Okay, so just if you remember that Venus interval 1 starts with a conjunction with Venus, and interval 2 is where actually the speed of Venus relative to Earth is at its highest. So this is basically Venus moving away from Earth. Interval 5 is Venus moving towards Earth. Now, when you zoom out and take a look at the price behavior during these intervals, you can see some really interesting patterns. Intervals 2 and 5 really seem to be where the most trending behavior happens, okay? 1, 6, 3, and 4 is where we tend to see reversals in price. So we saw basically the double bottom in 2022 and January 2023 in this 3 and 4. And we saw the previous all-time high back in December 2021 over here in this interval 6. Okay, interval 1 kicked off the move down. Interval 2 is when the move down really accelerated. So you can see some really interesting patterns here, and I like to use these to adapt my strategy, my trading strategy. 2 and 5 is really where a trend trading strategy makes the most sense. The others, 6, 1, 3, and 4, is where maybe more of an option selling as opposed to an option purchasing strategy makes a little bit more sense. You can see here how 6 and 1 in 2023 really was just an extended consolidation from basically June through to October. So this is definitely not an area of trending price. Same thing with the 6 over here, definitely not an area of trending price. So if you're trading using EMAs in these areas, you're chopping up your account. You can trade with EMAs and 2, 5, no problem, right? And sometimes you'll get like an interval 1 here that's kind of trending, but you'll notice it's quite volatile. But the best time to do simple trend trading strategies is in 2 and 5. So this is why I really love Venus intervals, because it allows me to adapt my strategy to what is likely to be the trending or non-trending price behavior. Now, keep in mind that these comments are done relative to the NASDAQ futures. I mean, if you can't just take what I just said and apply it to Shiba Inu coin and expect it to work, right? So you will need to do some homework relative to the coins or the commodities or the stocks and indexes you want to trade, and just validate that there's some repeatable behavior here. Okay, so that's Venus intervals. Very powerful stuff. I love starting with Venus intervals. Okay, next most powerful stuff in the time trades toolkit. I think it relates to white magic levels. So let's take a look at these. These are best seen at a weekly level. Okay, so I'm going to turn off Venus intervals. All right, and now we're looking at weekly, and you can see how relatively important white magic levels are. If we scroll back in time, we can see how the low over here in 2002 in NASDAQ futures perfectly tapped that white magic level. Some of the behavior, the price behavior that I tend to notice around white magic levels is when it goes through, it'll almost always come back for a retest. In this case, there was 3 retests before it got going. Again, over here, we got a tap, and then it attempted a retest, failed, and then continued down hard. All right. And you can see here, it takes a lot of energy to break through these white magic levels. Like this is 2011 through basically the entire year of 2011 was spent chopping around this white magic level before it finally broke through. Okay. So this is, even though like white magic levels, they don't tend to offer like absolutely perfect rejection or support levels, at least on NQ. But you can certainly expect a slowdown in price as it works its way through. You know, at almost every white magic level, it slows down the prior trend, and it takes some additional effort to get through there. This is a great example of a small retest, went up to the 2018 high, came down for a near perfect tag in December 2018. And then the COVID crash over here in February 2020 started just above a white magic level. So one of the things that I kind of look at is this area just above a white magic level is kind of a danger area. This is where I see a lot of pivots start to develop, right? So if a stock can't just blast right through, often it will reverse. So there's an example of, you know, after this after the COVID crash, there's a recovery, went up, tapped it, retested it for a week, and then it never looked back. Okay. And here's an example of it gets up into this danger area, stalls out, falls down, and that's in January of 2022. Okay, you can see over here in July of 23 how got above, and then it just had to consolidate sideways until October of 23 before it had the energy to really push up. So white magic level is super interesting. Now, when you combine these and subdivide these, and we offer 2 different ways to subdivide these white magic levels. I'm going to start with the latest method that I've found courtesy of another time trades user, subdividing white magic levels into eighths. Now, this draws basically 1/8 lines in teal between the white magic levels. And you can see how these lines start to create some incredibly strong support and resistance levels. So I'll let you take a look at that with your favorite stock or commodity, but you can see how compelling these lines are when you subdivide these white magic levels into eighths. You can also do the same thing with Pythagorean ratios. Okay, this is another way to subdivide it. This is the original way that Time Trades has supported subdividing it. I'm not sure this is my favorite anymore. I think I'm I think I'm more of a fan of 8s, but you still get some incredible support and resistance zones around these orange Pythagorean ratios. And of course, if you want, you can turn on both, right? And now you get some excellent levels here. So find something that works for you and the commodities and stocks that you're trading. All right, so that's white magic levels, and we've covered Venus intervals, which are so those are really the top most powerful aspects to the time trade script. So let's take a look at eclipse season here. So we're still on a weekly. We can drop down into a daily. Now, when eclipse season is turned on, this just draws a purple box, purple by default, around the time zones where solar and lunar eclipses tend to happen. And eclipses tend to happen in pairs. Some occasionally, rarely, we will get 3. We don't label the exact eclipses on the in the box, but and also this season does not start with an eclipse and end with an eclipse. It is based on analysis of the speed of the nodes and how those tend to change around eclipses. So it's a little bit wider than the actual eclipse season. But what's interesting is when you have the ability to kind of mark eclipse season on a chart, it rarely trends. You rarely see a trend. This time over here is in May 2022 is kind of an exception. But yeah, I mean, often you'll see it's almost like a broadening formation, right? Where you'll see a high and you'll see a low, and then everything kind of and then the normal trend will resume coming after it. In this case, we got a low first and then a high, and then the trend resumed. In this case, we got a low first and then a high, and then we came back down to complete a double bottom. So eclipse season is useful, but what I find really interesting and actually more compelling with eclipse season is to combine it with the cheat code. The cheat code draws 2 lines on the chart. One is purple and frequent, and the other is teal and infrequent. Now, the teal line, let's turn those on. The teal line is halfway between eclipses. Okay, between eclipse seasons. And what you see here is how it tends to catch some major pivots. So this is super interesting how these teal lines identify major pivot areas. So this is one perfect hit in February 2022. Here's another one in August 2022. And so what this is telling us is that, even though there's a lot of news and publicity around eclipse season, halfway between eclipse season is much more interesting from a financial standpoint, as it does tend to identify these major pivots or pauses in the trend, right? And in the last one in January of 2024, it really indicated kind of a completion of this pause here in January, and then the trend resumed up. Okay, and we're coming into a new eclipse season here. So those are the teal cheat code lines. Now the purple cheat code lines, again, those are also based on node speed, but one of the price behaviors that I find are kind of commonly related with the purple cheat code lines is a pump and dump. So if we were to go into an intraday, I'm not going to do it here, but if we were to go into an intraday and take a look at like February 16th, oh, sure, let's do it. Click on 1 hour, go find February 16th. And we can see how this price action kind of lined up with the purple cheat code. And I mentioned pump and dump. We can see the pump and we can see the dump. So the dump in this case was like 4 or 5 days. So very good alignment there with sort of standard interpretation of a purple cheat code line. And often we'll see, a net a down day on the day of a purple cheat code or the day after, right? Sometimes these reverse and invert, and we get up days like this. Here's an example of where we did a dump and pump, where we made a lower low and then we moved up for a couple days. All right, so some very interesting price action can be in the short term can be identified with the purple cheat code. Longer term price action can be identified with the teal cheat code. All right, and these all align and are part of sort of the eclipse season and lunar motion, and we're trying to capture and visualize that and put it on the screen for you. Okay, so let's take a look at medium pivots. Medium pivots are based on speed of the inner planets. Okay, so you'll see a medium pivot plus. This is where it crosses the speed crosses the zero line, goes into positive territory. Medium pivot negative is the reverse. It crosses the zero line, goes into negative territory. And often you'll see pivots happen around here. For example, April 2022, there's a perfect tag. This goes down to May 2023. Look at this, just beautiful trend bracketed by medium pivots, just perfect. Doesn't work all the time. But what's interesting is, if you look at this pair, right? We had a medium pivot in July. The price range is pretty much exactly the same. If you draw a price horizontally across here, you almost hit the price for this medium pivot candle in September. So we didn't get a trend in this case, and it looks like we got a pivot halfway between those two, but the price range did match. So kind of interesting behavior there. Again, this is based on planetary speed. So what we're doing here is we're displaying different cycles on your chart, so you can use these as anchor points for analysis here. Yeah, look for trends. It's kind of the trend in this case. The price trend in this case definitely price was definitely trending up, and it's hard to see a correlation here with respect to medium pivots other than just they're going up with the general trend in price. So again, like a lot of financial astrology stuff, these things work sometimes, but not all the time. Here's a great example of when they are working well, right? Over here, we've got a high in November, we've got a high in December, we've got a high in February, and these are all indicated very cleanly here with these medium pivots, the next one coming in April. All right, so that's medium pivots. We've covered cheat code. We can take a look at lunar, apogee, and perigee. So this is just where the moon is at its closest approach to Earth. So that is perigee. And apogee is where the moon is farthest away from Earth. A stands for apogee, also means away. P stands for proximate or proximal, and also is the first letter in perigee. That's how I tell the difference. Again, you can see some interesting cycles here in lunar distance between lunar distance and price, right? So here we've got a perigee to perigee trend, right? 1 month straight up, and then a pause at apogee, move up into perigee, pause and top at apogee. So again, just being able to display these on the chart gives you a good sense of the lunar motion, and it also helps you to think about the lunar motion more in 3 dimensions, right? It's not just you know, full moon, new moon. There's also distance relationships that you can look at. And uh, often when you get things like a full moon or a new moon at perigee, those can be stronger cycles and create stronger reactions than when it's at apogee. So yeah, this is interesting, and it also shows the future apogee and perigee labels moving into the future here as well. Okay, so that's that. We can also take a look at declination events. Now, declination is how high the moon is in the sky above the equator. Yellow is maximum northern declination. Blue is maximum southern declination. Green is zero declination. Okay. So when the moon is high in the sky, it's if you're in the northern hemisphere, then it's usually at or around the yellow line. If it's high in the sky and you're in the southern hemisphere, then it's at or around the blue line. Okay, so let's turn that on. We can take a look at the relationships here. Now, W.D. Gann used these dates a lot, and you can see why. I think these have a very good relationship with pivots. Now, the default interpretation of these, and I stress default, is that yellow tends to align with highs, and blue tends to align with lows. Okay. And you can see how there's a shift in this recent trend from yellows being highs. Now yellows are starting to become lows, right? So you can see how the trend is subtly shifting away from the default interpretation of declination highs being a high in price to declination highs are now being a low in price. All right. So, and you can also tend to detect longer term changes in trend with changes in behavior in the lunar declination line. So, here, if we look at this trend up basically from the 2023 low, we can see how we got a pretty consistent trend of higher highs around lunar declination peaks, right? Until we got over here to August, right? And then we got a lower low. And what's interesting here is if you look at the top, the price at this high was pretty much a match with the blue, right? We got a match over here as well. And blue, before that, blue was higher. So blue was higher than yellow, yellow was higher than blue, blue was higher than yellow, yellow higher than blue, very strong trend. And then we started seeing this change in character where blue was not higher than yellow, it was pretty much a match. Blue was not higher than yellow, it was pretty much a match, right? And then we turned the corner and started heading down. Okay, so if you look closely at the price pattern in these lunar declination lines, you can pick up on changes in character in the price action and identify some longer term turns in the market, right? And you know, this changing character over here in July kind of kicked off this consolidation / down move into late October. And then the move up started here. And if I turn on Venus intervals, you'll see the move up started almost exactly the day we entered Venus interval 2, okay, our trending Venus interval. All right, so there's some really interesting information here that you can pick up on using the time trade script. Okay, so that's lunar declination. We also have lunar signs in here. Okay, Now, this is a lot of labels, and it's best seen on an intraday chart, okay? So, but it does indicate where the moon enters a new geocentric sign. And you can pick up on some pretty good repeatable patterns here. Specifically, um, during this whole uptrend, starting in October of 2023, there has been a pretty consistent pattern of pullbacks in Virgo and Libra, right? The first one was very, very weak pullback, almost non-existent. The second one over here, Moon was in Virgo and Libra, and we saw, about 3-4 days pullback over here that ended in Libra, and then the uptrend resumed. And then slowly the corrections and the pullbacks in Virgo and Libra get deeper and deeper. Here we are in January. Okay, got a good pullback that ended January 5th. Here we are in late January, a little 2-day pullback. Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, and then Moon and Scorpio. The uptrend resumed. Okay. And now we're starting to see some different price behavior where we're seeing pullbacks in Gemini and Cancer, and not only Virgo and Libra. Okay, so here's a little pullback in Virgo and Libra in February, and we're coming up to another time in late March. All right. So that is that. Actually, you can see what's interesting here is Gemini, Cancer, Leo, 3 days down. That happened in February. We're actually just coming up to that right here, right now in March. We've got Gemini and Cancer, Leo coming up here starting this week. So if this pattern resumes, we can expect another couple of red days. All right, so that is the lunar signs. Let's take a look at the last two items here, prior week levels and prior day levels. So this is just a pure price action indicator, and all I'm doing with these is carrying forward. Actually, let's go to an intraday time frame. Let's go to 1 hour. All we're doing with these is carrying forward the prior day's high, low, and close. So that is the thin red line here. Okay, so that's the prior day's high. Okay, that's this line up here. This line down here is the prior day's high. That's there. Prior day's high, prior day's high, prior day's high, and we're just carrying that forward to the current day. That's it. Blue is close, green is low. All right. And this was inspired by the work of Stacy Burke. He always tries to buy at prior day's low or sell at a prior day's high. And you can see how these price levels are often respected very, very well by the market. Okay. So you can see here how there's a dump that started on the prior week's close. That's the thick blue line. And that dump came down into this level. And here's an example of a pump that started on the prior day's low over here. So on Thursday, March 7th, we got a couple of wicks down on the prior day's low, and then that started a pump. So I'm going to include a link to a video in this video description to Stacy Burke's playlist. It is excellent. He's just a pure price action trader. And I find that the combination of financial astrology timings along with these levels is very, very compelling and creates some excellent low risk entries. Okay, so we're only seeing like 1 week worth of prior week's levels. So if I zoom out to a daily view, then you can see more of the prior week's levels. So there we go. And you can see how the prior week's low was a great entry over here on March 5th. And you can see how they tend to provide support, tend to provide resistance. This is where other time frame traders will enter the market, right? Because they'll want to sell at the prior week's high or enter at the prior week's low. And this is where a lot of trends get kicked off. So everything I've said about prior days levels also applies to prior weeks levels. And this just makes it convenient to put those on your chart. All right, so that is the time trade script. Now, actually, there's one more thing I want to show on this, which is a technique to add alerts. All right, so if we go and turn on, let's say, white magic levels and eighths, right? And if you click on the three dots here that say more, right? And you can say add alert on time trades. Now, let's say you look at this and you go, wow, Blair, this is awesome. I want to be alerted when price crosses one of these eighths levels. So you can do that. TradingView will do that for you. You can add an alert on the time trade script. And the condition is set up here, okay? So there's three types of alerts. When a white magic level is crossed, Pythagorean is crossed, 1/8 is crossed, or there's a gap, okay? So you can differentiate between simply crossing a level or a gap. So let's say we want to use 1/8, and I want to trigger it, let's say once per bar. So we're on a daily chart here, so that would be once per day. Alert name, 1/8 of ML crossed, and hit create. Now I will be alerted on my mobile device or in the web app or in the desktop app when that alert is triggered, okay? And you will see over here in the alerts configuration, this configuration that's set up that we just created here for NQ. All right. So that is a very cool use of TradingView for alerts. So that way you could get alerted on this bar, you could get alerted on this bar, and really take the power of these levels and just be made aware of when any stock in TradingView or coin in TradingView is crossing these levels. Okay, so that's the time trades script. There's a second script I also want to cover in here, which is called time trades intraday. All right, so this is also another invite only script. So if we search for time trades intraday, you can see it here. Now, this script, despite its name, will work on a daily time frame. Okay, it has a lot of the similar data points as the regular time trade script has. It has white magic levels. You can subdivide it into eights. It'll show prior weeks, prior days. I do that as a convenience, but I have time trades intraday as a separate script because it has 3 additional data points. It has lunar signs, just the same as a regular time trade script, but it also has void of course, lunar aspects, and Vedic intraday periods. So let's take a look at those, but we'll take a look at these on like a 15-minute interval, okay? Because this is kind of the interval where this is intended to be used. All right. So we can turn on lunar signs. So this will show us when the moon is changing signs. Okay, so this is sign changes from Gemini, Cancer. It'll show future sign changes. It shows past sign changes. You can see how this sign change over here into Taurus actually correlated with the start of this dump down. Often you'll see that where a sign change correlates with a change in trend. Okay. Now in astrology, there's this notion of something called a void of course. Okay, now void of course kind of pairs with this concept of aspects. So I'm going to talk about these at the same time. Now, if we take a look at this example over here, where the moon is shifting, moon has entered Aries, and then there's a bunch of lunar aspects. An aspect is basically just an angle with another planet, or the lunar node or the sun. And the last aspect that it makes in Aries, okay, is the start of the void of course. The void of course is kind of like, it's like running out the end of the sign, right? So there's no more aspects to be had and until the moon enters Taurus. So we're tracking this void of course time and identifying it with an orange box, right? Now, the way you play this as a trader is basically expect volatility, fake outs, and reversals during this period of time. That's kind of the standard playbook on a void of course. Now, void of course can last anywhere from 2 days to 2 minutes, right? It all depends on how things line up in the sky. All right, so you're going to see different size orange boxes here that define the void of course. All right, but the playbook for trading them is always the same. Expect fake outs and reversals during the void of course time. One of the things I like to do as a trader is to you can identify the price level at the high and the low of the void of course, and play a trend trade after the void of course finishes, because sometimes you may not want to trade in here because of all the fake outs and reversals. So the reverse means that when the void of course is over, the real trend will emerge, right? So you can trade that by putting basically a buy stop at the top and a sell stop at the bottom. And you can see here how this low made during the void of course created an actual support level that was respected very well, at least temporarily, over here at around 18,100, right? And even though it made a new high over the void of course high, that was very short-lived and then quickly sold off from there. So the other comment I'll make about void of courses is the longer the void of course, the more important the levels are. So these short little ones over here, less important levels. The longer ones, like this guy that lasted most of Tuesday, that's pretty long for a void of course. So yeah, it's a good idea to mark those levels on your chart, and you can use those as traditional support and resistance levels. All right, so that is void of course, and that's a couple of the plays that we like to use with those. Now you can also see some of the aspects that are here. You can see the moon moves really fast, makes a ton of aspects in the sky. If you're unfamiliar with financial astrology, and in general, square aspects are negative. So we can see here a square is a 90-degree aspect. It could be 90 or 270 with Venus. You can see how that kicked off a dump, right? Moon square Venus. So we've got another square aspect with the sun coming up here, square aspect with Neptune. And also in general, trine aspects tend to be bullish. Okay, so again, these are just rules of thumb. Especially when it comes to lunar aspects, there can be other things happening in the sky that tend to be more influential. Here's trine Pluto, represents the low. So what I would advise is not, again, not to have any expectations about this. Don't anticipate the direction coming into this. If you do want to make a trade based on an aspect, set set some high and low buy and sell stops based on the recent range, and let the market kind of elect you into the trend, whatever trend is emerging afterwards, right? So don't try to anticipate this based on my rules of thumb. Let the market decide what direction it wants to go and let it take you into the trade, right? So that's a little bit of advice there on trading the aspects. Okay. Now the last thing I want to show here is Vedic intraday. Now these are like super, super fast short-term signals. Okay. So these are based on KP astrology. It's a form of Vedic astrology. And it's based on this concept of sublords of lunar travel. Now, you'll see a bunch of labels here labeled bear, bull, potential high of day, consolidation, bear, consolidation, neutral. Now, personally, what I find most reliable of these is the exaltation and debilitation. That's basically these mean the potential high of day or low of day labels. So it's the gray ones and the purple ones. And here's an example of moon exaltation, potential high of day, perfectly tags a high of day. All right. It's not always that perfect, of course. But one of the things I do find is you'll probably go a little crazy if you expect bull trends out of all of the bull labels, right? The most reliable labels do tend to be just the purple ones and the gray ones, exaltation and debilitation. All right, so that's my recommendation on using the Vedic intraday labels. Stick with the exaltation and debilitation ones, and don't go nuts on the bear or bull ones. They're much less reliable in terms of direction. Okay, so that's my summary here of the time trades and the time trades intraday script. Thanks again for using time trades, and we will talk to you again on the next video. Bye now.